unfortunately, I couldn't go to the other office today, so I had to go to another party office.
Yeah.
All right.
The background looks beautiful.
Oh. I'm just going to go live. It should be.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. It's just going to take a couple of seconds. It shouldn't take too long. Okay. That's strange.
Will you say a few words about the Bologna Book Club?
Of course.
Yeah.
Like to you or?
Yeah.
We're just a couple of friends because there's this School of Politics in Italy.
Yes.
That's organized by the ex-Prime Minister Enrico Letta.
Okay. So it's not the John Hopkins?
No, it's not the John Hopkins.
Yeah.
That would have been really cool.
No. That's still... Yeah.
Well, most of the time, actually, we get our books from the John Hopkins because the John Hopkins has a really good library. And I'm just trying to understand why it's not connecting. Oh, yeah, sorry. I don't understand why it's not connecting. Sorry, I'm just going to take 3 more seconds.
No, don't worry.
That's so strange.
And your friends, you're all based in Bologna, or why is it?
Well, this other friend of mine, because they can connect in various ways. Some of us are in Bologna. For example, I think Luca Bazzoni is in Frankfurt, I think.
Okay.
And then there are some American friends, but I'm not sure where they are right now. And most of us are in Bologna, but I don't understand why my stream key is not working. This is so strange. Oh, I think it's working now. I tested everything before, but wow, this is really strange. I'm sorry. Technical issues. Anyway, most of the time we read books on politics, and we had invited the Professor Gaddis, who's an expert in the Cold War, and we also invited Professor Etzi, who is an expert in environmental law.
Right.
And I do not understand why my stream key is not working.
But as long as we are connected, then I didn't cause the mistake, no?
No, it's on my side. I do not understand what's happening, actually. I'm just going to try.
I could enter it normally, like a normal video conference. Do you have to let everybody else in?
No, well, normally we put it on 3 different channels, so like people can choose where to go in. For example, Luca's right here with us, but I think I messed up somewhere. So I'm just going to try to go back and redo it.
Yeah.
But usually, we read books on politics. We're about 17 people.
Yeah.
And well, I don't know. I'm not sure what else we could say. But
no, it's good to know. Do you want me to reconnect, or shall I just stay on this line?
No. Just stay here. I think it should be fine now. In theory, I'm already in, but it's just not connecting. I do not know what I did wrong. I'm so sorry. Okay, I think we're just gonna have to start like this because I just can't get it going.
But do you think people can see and listen, or?
Yeah, because it just means that one of the channels isn't working.
Okay.
It means that it says it's working right now, so I think we're live actually.
We're live.
Okay, sorry. I'm not that good with technical stuff.
No, that's perfect.
Gosh, that's so embarrassing.
No. I'm totally fine with improvising.
Okay.
And it fits the topic, really.
Well, we're here today with Martin Heipertz. Is that the right pronunciation?
Heipertz, yes. Yeah.
Heipertz. Yes. He's the author of this wonderful book. It's called Ruling Europe. Actually, I really enjoyed it because you seem to be able to always put the seeds for questions and then answer them almost immediately after, which is really enjoyable. And I'm not sure if it was intentional or maybe it's a stylistic thing you have. And the book's about the SGP, which is the Stability and Growth Pact. And well, first of all, maybe you could talk about it for 5 minutes before we start asking you some questions, like just some general considerations, etc. I think that'd be more comfortable.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I have to say, I'm actually quite surprised that the book is still being read and perceived. I've heard this several times now, and this is a great honor, I have to say. And the credit goes, of course, in equal share to my co-author, Amy Verdun, and myself. It was actually Amy's idea to write the book. We published a paper before, and the paper was already quite successful. I think that was back in 2002 or what? No, it was even so shortly after the turn of the millennium. And Amy, already at the basis of that paper, she said we should turn this into a book. And that's what we did at the Max Planck Institute for the Studies of Society. And I continued at the European Central Bank, and that was quite helpful, because at the ECB I really got also a practical insight into the matter. Because, as you know, in 2004 the pact was reformed after it had been broken allegedly in 2003. So I was honored to work on the reform of the pact and to follow also the deliberations in the European Court of Justice. And that really taught me a great deal from the practical side as well. So the book then came out when I had already left the ECB, I think in 2009. And it covers the history of the Stability and Growth Pact, pretty much up to and including the ruling of the European Court of Justice in 2004. So everything that follows wasn't covered by us. So we didn't look at anything that you guys are probably much more acquainted with, like the so-called 2-pack and 6-pack and the fiscal rules and so on. I did follow the issue, of course, and I kept working on fiscal issues, particularly when working for the German government in Berlin in the Ministry of Finance. But I didn't follow so closely the legal sides of it. And that's even more, in that sense, it's even more surprising to me that the book is still being read, because in a way, of course, it's outdated, right? It only covers the origins of the pact and the first big crisis, as well as its legal aftermath. And it stops there, obviously. But for some reason, maybe you'll be telling me why it's still relevant. We thought, from a political science perspective, it's important to marry or join those competing theoretical approaches, which we put in 4 boxes. And one of the questions pertain to that also. So there are these different schools of thought in political economy on European integration, which is very much Amy's field of expertise, political integration theory. And her approach, not only in this book, but I think more generally, is to overcome the divisions between the different schools of thought and to propose what she calls an eclectic approach, to really pick and choose from the different explanatory approaches what best fits the issue at hand, or to use it as a way of looking at the same issue from different angles. And that's what we did in this particular case. And we thought it was quite instructive. And probably we would suggest to continue doing that sort of analysis also on the on those developments that follow the period which we cover. So maybe that's of introduction. I assume since you've read the book, I will not go through the whole history of the pact. Let me leave it there with maybe one little exemption. I would like to close with an anecdote. When doing the research, I had the honor to speak to Theo Weigel several times. He was the Minister of Finance of Germany at the time when the pact was proposed and negotiated. And Theo Weigel told me that when he presented the idea to have the Stability and Growth Pact for the first time in the Ministers' Council, the ECOFIN. He said that his Italian colleague, I think at the time it was Tremonti, came up to him, and I think it's even in the book, the story, and congratulated him to his great idea with the Stability and Growth Pact. And one thing that's not in the book is then I asked Theo Weigel, so didn't you think that that's odd when the Italian Minister of Finance congratulates you? Shouldn't that make you nervous about your idea? And he just thought, okay, at the time he thought it was so flattering. Even the Italians are in favor. I said, no, that should have given you second thoughts. And he said, why is that? And I said, I don't know, but look at it from the point of view of a country that is really desperate to meet the convergence criteria of the Maastricht Treaty. And they are basically faced with an unmanageable task to bring down their public debt to 60%, right? Which is completely impossible. And then there's this other thing with the deficit criterion, 3%. But that's doable, right? That you can always tweak your deficit for a couple of years to go at or below 3%. But to reduce the debt level in 2.5 years is a bit more daunting. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting that this is the way that the Italian government looked at the pact at the time, but obviously what the pact really did, and this became clear to me much later than I think it's not so clear in the book. The pact put a disbalance between the two fiscal criteria of the Maastricht Treaty. So before the pact, you had two reference values for fiscal policy. You had the debt reference value and the deficit one. After the pact, people only worried about the deficit. And they basically took the debt developments for granted. And I think that is a huge mistake. So this disbalance, and obviously then years and years later, when I worked for the government and we were looking at the Greek debt crisis and then everything else which followed as of 2010, we really understood. I mean, to me, it was sort of blatantly clear that what really matters is the debt level and not the deficit. And within debt, what really matters at the core of the matter from a market perspective is the ratio between your tax income, your tax earnings, and the money you pay for debt service, so interest payments. That is the most relevant fiscal policy ratio if you want to retain market finance. And obviously that's the least considered variable in the whole edifice of the pact and the 2-pack and 6-pack and what have you. So to finish here, I think this anecdote goes to say that it is an amazing edifice of political integration, of rule making, and for lawyers, for economists, for political scientists. It's a heyday. I mean, the Stability and Growth Pact is really an enormous field of study, but I think it's completely off point, right? If you look at what you really want to achieve is fiscal. Basically, is the sustainability of your market finance. So I leave it there, and I would propose that we go through your questions one by one, and then enter the debate with fresh and new questions as we go along. Okay.
Well, there's another really funny, well, at least for me, funny anecdote with the decision to make a compromise between the German and the French position, which was something like 0.5 to 1%.
Yes.
And they decided to take an arbitrary number in between, which was 0.75. That was really funny for me too. I mean, I always imagined that all these numbers were always calculated or backed by economic theory. So that was really interesting to hear. Yeah. Another story.
Not even, by the way, before we even the reference values are totally arbitrary. I was told, I'm not sure if that's true, but I was told by a colleague from the Netherlands that the 60% debt reference value was more or less the average at the time of the negotiating the Maastricht Treaty, but people were reasonably sure that it would exclude Italy, right? So they said 60% is good for us, but it keeps Italy out. And then one Dutch economist allegedly, I mean, I've never validated that story, but allegedly in Maastricht, in the taxi, on the back of the taxi, back of the envelope, as you say, they calculated the deficit that you need in order to stabilize debt at 60% under a given inflation and growth rate. And that's how you arrive at 3%. And I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, there's another story for the 3%, which is related to the French fiscal policy in the 80s, where they invented the 3% rule, but somehow this fitted, you know. Yeah, but this is really, I mean, this says a lot about how these rules are to be seen from a purely economic perspective. I mean, it's politics. In the end, it is all politics. Yeah. So let's debate.
So the first question that we had actually sent you and were wondering what you thought about was the suspension of the fiscal rule. So we were wondering if you think that this would give an opportunity for a more meaningful reform in the SGP. And
I would say that people probably don't have the appetite to reform the SGP now. It doesn't hinder them anymore. So it was quite easy to suspend it. It was not a discussion. I've heard nobody, maybe you came across, but I haven't seen anybody defending the pact and sort of saying we should not suspend the rules. This was more or less univocal. So people probably don't see the need that the reform is and in the past was driven by two motivations. One was to loosen the framework, and the other was to basically save elements of stringency and discipline. And that's why you have a renegotiation of the setting. That is probably, to my mind, unless I'm wrong, and maybe you see more than I do, but I don't think that there will be a need to do so, because there's no need to ask for more flexibility, and there's probably no desire on either side to reinstate more discipline. So probably I would be very surprised if somebody came up. What I expect more, and this is one of the other questions, that people would propose to change the system altogether. But changing the existing rules and basically staying in that frame of mind is, I think, will not require a reform.
And another question, which I'm not sure if it actually, you partially answered it, but like if we were to change the whole system without treaty change, how would you see this change, or what would you hope that this change would be if we were to try to change?
Yeah,
not sure. I said change too many times. Sorry.
Yes. I don't think the system is very useful. And I don't think there's a reform. So the flaws are actually systemic. So I would really advocate also in the later questions, we come to that point, to really think out of the box. I think this is there's this saying, right? If you're sitting on a dead horse, you should dismount. This is pretty much a dead horse, I would say. It's systemically flawed. The credibility has, I think, been eroded by too many changes and breaks of the rules. So I can't tell you, I mean, in terms of replying to that question, I can't now come up with a proposal and say we should do this and that, and then it will work much better. I don't think so. I think it's done. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's a dead horse. That's a wonderful analogy.
Yeah.
And
you shouldn't try to ride a dead horse. Yeah.
There's this more. Well, we have some friends who work. They're doing a traineeship in the ECB, and they're wondering if you had any ideas of. I don't study economics, so I'm not really sure if I understood this right. But it's what do you think of abandoning fiscal rules in favor of fiscal standards? It's this idea that they got from a paper from the Peterson Institute.
Yes, and I looked at the paper. Yeah. Well, thanks first of all for the reference to the paper. it made me think of a famous remark I think in '97 by, or somewhat later, no, probably 2002, 2003, by Romano Prodi, who was Commission President at the time, and he said the pact is stupid, and that caused that caused an amazing scandal at the time. It was the stupid pact, and of course, I think in a way when Blanchard and the others, when they point to standards rather than rules, it's a bit the same argument. A rule is always, it's either totally complex and too complicated to basically cover for all eventualities, or it's very simple, straightforward, and thereby stupid. And you will not get out. It's a catch-22. For example, the German tax system tries to cover every possible feature of a taxation situation, and therefore the world's the world's scientific literature on taxation, 80% of it is in German. because the German tax law is so super complex, and at the same time people still think they can make it work. So they still actually work on this, and they try to understand it and to implement. Whereas in other countries, if it gets to this point of complexity, it's basically ignored. or, but in Germany, yeah. So you get it's a rules-based culture, really. I mean, a lot of this has to be understood also from a point of sort of cultural sociology. We love rules. Also, I think in Scandinavia, it's a Germanic thing. We really love rules. And if they don't fit the circumstances, then we try to make more rules, right? But I would fundamentally argue that fiscal policy cannot be run by a rule, by autopilot. It's a bit, I mean, you probably know this debate also from monetary policy. It was very fashionable, Taylor rules and what have you. I guess these things, fiscal and monetary policy, economic policy more widely, is political and economic, and you cannot constrain a political system to rules. It's not, as I said, it's not to be run by autopilot. So what I think, also standards is not a solution. I really believe you need institutions. And now political scientists would say, well, but a rule is an institution. There's this whole debate in political science literature about what are institutions, and many would argue a rule is already an institution. When I speak of institution, I mean it in the more colloquial sense. You need a Ministry of Finance, you need a central bank, you need a budget, you need Parliament to approve the budget, you need a government, basically. That's what you need. And that's my main point. I will touch on this, I think, for the better part of the session now. I think what you really need is a government, a federal government with a federal budget. Of course, we still need national governments and national budgets. And the federal government needs to be able to basically put limits on those national budgets. Like we know from all other federal systems, that there's some sort of control and exertion being put on the sub-federal entities in order not to harm I mean, this is, in the end, this is all about moral hazard, as you know, and fiscal spillovers. This is all very much true from the functional interpretation of the issue. But I believe that you will never ever get a sort of, you'll never be confident with a rules-based system which doesn't cater for your eventualities, which doesn't cater for political interests, which doesn't cater for power struggles, for election campaigns, for emergencies of all kinds of sorts. So my really to see the solution only in sort of forward-looking further integration, deeper integration. I don't think that this sort of level of integration that is captured by the SGP and the Maastricht Treaty is sufficient and will take us sort of in a reliable way forward. Yeah. But
Wow,
let's
that's
touch on
really
this in the
interesting.
debate. Yeah.
Because well, what's really interesting is, if I'm not wrong, the title of the book, "Ruling Europe," actually comes from the fact that, in a certain sense, you're criticizing the fact that they're rules and not institutions.
Yeah.
I think I read that
So
somewhere in the book.
I need
Pardon
to
me?
have put you back on my speaker because I had to.
Oh,
Sorry
no
about.
worries.
Here we go. Bluetooth. It's always when I get a call, the thing switches off. Good. Now I hear you again. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. No worries. So, actually, your image is frozen, I think. Okay, now I can see you perfectly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you actually practically responded to the third question. So, you're practically
Yes.
saying that we need treaty change, or in a certain sense, maybe you're even
Yes.
saying that we need Europe with different levels, a sort of
Yes.
French theory of Europe,
Yes.
which is really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yes. I
And
totally agree.
that's really very, very interesting. Actually, many other friends who study economics were saying the same thing, because
Yeah.
I study political science, which is a bit different. And so the fifth question, which I have, was, do you think that the SGP is actually strengthening the integration process, or
No. No. I think it was divisive. There was a lot of. First of all, the SGP is basically the German lawyers' excuse for not integrating further. It's like you think you have a solution, but it isn't really a solution. So it's a detour. It's a detour. We were fooling ourselves, I believe, to think that we could fix the problems associated with fiscal policy in a monetary union through this way. I know the people in the Ministry of Finance in Germany, they truly believed that this would work. And I think with the older generation, there is a huge disappointment that somehow it didn't work. And they would always point to the others and say, yeah, or even to themselves, as Germany having broken the pact together with France in 2003. So they always look at the political actors and say the system itself was fine. It would have been a viable, a good system, but it wasn't adhered to. And you have this school of thought very prominently, at least in Germany, and also in the former central bank community, and also the ECB, Bundesbank people, Ottmar Issing, and these guys, And at the time when I was at the ECB, we subscribed, we summarized this school of thought by the nickname Ohio, which stood for keep your own house in order. The Ohio thesis, own house in order. And that was the sort of that was the underlying idea. If everybody keeps their own house in order, the system will work fine. So we need to somehow internalize all these externalities that speak in favor of abusing the moral hazard. And that's the purpose of the rules. So the rules will help to keep your own house in order. Like in southern Germany, where they have this rule that on a Saturday morning you have to swipe the part of your street in front of your house, and if everybody complies to that rule, then the whole street is clean. Yeah, that's the thinking. And I think there's nothing sort of mentally or sort of theoretically wrong with that approach. It's just that it's not realistic in a political environment where it's not about rules and sort of keeping your own house in order. It's purely about interests, and you have time inconsistency. This was the main thrust of my own research for the doctoral thesis. I basically applied the idea of time inconsistency to political rules, and and in this case to a fiscal rule. And my point was, in German it's called a Selbstbindungsdilemma. I said you always have a dilemma of self-commitment, which is very similar to time inconsistency. It's rational for you to commit to a goal politically, but it's time inconsistent in the sense that if you have more urgent interests that would ask you to basically deny your commitment and sort of drop it, you will always do that. You will always do that. I mean, nobody with an interest in winning an election will care for European rule. Once it's become clear anyway that there's no sanctioning, it's almost impossible to sanction it. So why should people stick to the rule? And it's not that they're sort of badly behaved or haven't understood the beauty of the system. It's just not politically realistic. It is legal thinking, and it's void of political understanding, I would say. And I think it's something to do also with the Germanic rules-based culture that people fell into that mental trap. So I would really advocate dropping it and realizing that this hasn't any future, and that the only thing that would work from my point of view in a reliable manner is developing governmental institutions.
That's really interesting, because it also means that you're practically saying that automatic sanctions wouldn't have changed anything, because there would be no mechanism to enforce them.
Yeah.
Actually, the first part of the book talks almost exclusively about the automatic sanction debate. And that's really interesting to hear that it's, maybe when the younger generation take over, it'll change.
Yeah, you know what this really is? It's an attempt to depoliticize fiscal policy. And I think there are very few elements of government which are more political than fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is really, I mean, it's at the core of policy making, and it's also at the core of sovereignty. And it's, to my mind, it's completely impossible to. I mean, for example, the Dutch system, the Netherlands, I think they go pretty far in depoliticizing this by having this central planning bureau, which in a way validates budgets, validates even party programs in an election campaign. And I think that's sort of the utmost you can probably do in terms of depoliticizing. And I think sort of to achieve this across Europe, all in all, and sort of try to put this on autopilot and with automatic sanctions and all this business is completely, to my mind, the real mystery is not that this didn't work. To me, the real mystery is that some serious people thought it would work.
A funny fact is that Prodi lives like right there.
Really?
He lives like right over there.
Quite right.
Next time I see him, I'll ask him what he thinks about the SGP. I'm pretty sure he'll say the same thing. And
I will keep trying to put you on my speaker because but
of course.
Other than that, we just continue.
Of course.
I still hear you. It's just very tiny. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to search for my next question. I kind of forgot what it was.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, that's a very small comment. Maybe your next book will be Instituting Europe, since this book was ruling Europe, because they're rules. Sorry, stupid comment. And so I think the sixth question, which would have been, which of the four models do you think is closest to reality, was already answered, because you said that a more particularist approach where you choose the best model that fits the problem is the best. Let me see. This is the last question. Actually, you already answered this as well, because I was going to ask you about a phrase in the end of the book where you say that the book isn't meant to judge the SGP, but it's just an analysis. So I think we've finished all our questions, actually.
Yeah. Is there a way to engage with the audition and have a little, maybe a debate on this federalist point of mine? Because it's really my core message today, that I think we have reached a point where, thanks to the effects of the Corona crisis and the fact that we in the end monetized the debt crisis, and this is all ending up with the ECB, I think we will get back to the point where we need to decide on the future institutional shape of Europe. I'm deeply convinced that this crisis that's now coming up will not be mastered with the existing set of institutions. But that's my personal conviction, and I would be extremely interested if in this audience there's support or criticism of that thesis.
In theory, people can write to us because they could have joined us both inside and outside.
Right.
But I'm sure that my four economist friends they totally agree with you, because very often we speak about Europe more generally, actually, and I think that everyone really agrees that Europe needs treaty changes, and because you're talking about treaty changes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's really important that we get treaty changes, also from a more geopolitical point of view, because it seems like we're entering into a multipolar world. And in a multipolar world, the only way we can actually compete with other countries like China, or I'm not sure Russia, but like we need a more stronger system.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm deeply convinced of that. And I will say one other thing on this regard. The government, the German government, which proposed the Stability and Growth Pact, in principle, they still had an integrationist agenda. You could still see that they were not happy with the Maastricht Treaty. For them, it was lacking what they called political union. This is not so much the Ministry of Finance, but this was really the thinking at the time in the German Foreign Office and at the Chancellery. So they were integrationists. They didn't get very far, which is, I think, one of the main motives for them to go for the Amsterdam Treaty, which was, I suppose, a big disappointment to Kohl. And then the thing stopped. The thing stopped. We embarked on monetary union. Everything else is sort of known what happened. And to me, the Euro crisis as of 2010 would have been the ultimate chance to fix it and to really say, okay, the German taxpayer needs to underwrite the balance here and needs to take on the risk. But in exchange, we will ask for a political union. And I really sort of, I was, when I was in government at the time, I was really frustrated that nobody was even thinking about that, you know. So I was very isolated in the Ministry of Finance, advancing that sort of point. People thought it would not help with the crisis. It would add another problem, which is treaty change. People would you immediately kill this proposal with pointing out that it requires treaty change, and that this is politically completely utopian. And I accept that fact, but on the other hand, had Germany adopted such a position in a very clear and, let's say, rigid way, the pressure, the financial market pressure in 2010, 2011, 2012 would have been sufficient, I believe, to trigger such a negotiation. But once the ECB, of course, came in 2012 and said, we will do whatever it takes, the pressure was gone. And that to me is tragic in two ways. The first tragedy is that the German government didn't anymore ask for further integration as they would have done in the 90s. And that second, the whole pressure behind the issue went away when the only federal institution which we have, the ECB, you could argue if the Commission is a federal institution. I think the Commission is largely dysfunctional. But so the only functioning federal institution that we have, the ECB, when they, in a way, sort of faute de mieux, they contributed to this issue going away. And there we are. And now it's building up. The whole problem is, to my mind, sort of in terms of the numbers, it's building up on the balance of the ECB. And I'm deeply worried about the economic aftermath of COVID. Not only in terms of debt and inflation, but also in terms of the microeconomics of it. And let's see. I mean, my expectation is really one of another test, another very, very serious test of the system. And my conviction is that we need to change the system and need to take it forward. And one last word on this, because you seem all quite young guys. I mean, the old guys don't understand basically for them they keep sticking to the nation state, which has worked well for them. And they always argue that this federal European state is unthinkable because there's no European demos, there's no folk, and I think this is completely missing the young generation. And already I had the pleasure to basically grow up as a European. I'm also German, of course. I have this twin identity, but I can perfectly envisage having a federal common state with fellow Europeans. And we have to understand that I think this is a demand also that should be a demand of the young generation, like climate, and not less urgent than climate, I would say. So I would encourage you to take. That's why I sent this article, this utopian article of mine, which ends with this sort of with this cry for European integration. Otherwise, they'll ruin it. I mean, they will go back to the nation state, which I think is impossible. But I don't know what. But if what I'm saying is true, that we need further integration to overcome this problem, then we will certainly see a test. That's my main message, really, not the old book.
Well, I got this message on my phone that says that Italy practically was a separated state. Well, actually, to me, the image of India comes to mind, because India is totally different. Like when you go to Tamil Nadu, which is in the south, it's totally different. You get cultural differences, linguistic differences. Yeah. It's much bigger. And I totally believe that we could have, Europe doesn't need a demos to become Europe.
Yeah. And it's not on all fields of policy. I mean, but we're talking about foreign policy, security, military affairs, procurement of military equipment, and of course monetary policy, and the extent of integration you would need on the fiscal side, which isn't full scale, but you do need a proper budget, and you do need a way from the center to sort of avoid serious moral hazard at the national level. And that's it. And of course, for this, you need a government. And for the government, you need a parliament and a court. And all this we have, but we have it in a very, very dysfunctional, rudimentary type of development. Yeah.
I'll ask you one last question. So thank you very much for your time as well. But what do you think about the theory of creep, which is that slowly European rules and European ways are going into each country slowly, and slowly integration is inevitable? Very often in administrative law, we see this theory of creep.
Yes. I think what is true about this is to do with the functionalist approach and functionalist interpretation of European integration. You do have functional spillover. And there's also a public choice explanation to creep, in the sense that every working group wants to permanently exist and continue traveling to Brussels and having nice lunches and chew out new rules and legislation or proposals and studies. And so there is a public choice and a functional element of this, and it does not deliver good solutions. It's path dependent mentally and institutionally, and it doesn't. If there's a more underlying and deep problem, then the creep doesn't really help you to overcome it. So it's another sort of avenue which is not. I don't think it's very productive. Yeah, but it does happen, of course. Yeah. So maybe what we've also reached is a point of mopping up, cleaning up, and sort of really sort of saying this was good enough for the 20th century, but it isn't for the 21st.
Absolutely. Well, that was really amazing. Thank you so very much. It was wonderful having you. When you write your next book, Institutional Europe, please do send us an email.
Yes. Look, I mean, a book of mine is now coming out in Germany. I spent a year in Kosovo in 2008, and so I learned a lot about foreign policy. And this is the other really big field where I'm strongly federalist now, after that experience in Kosovo, where it is a huge. I mean, the Western Balkans are a core strategic interest of Europe, and we are completely impotent. But we will pay the bill, and we will have the refugees, and we will basically, it's our problem, and we leave it to the Americans and the Russians to spoil it. And it's our backyard, and we really have to get our act together. It's just, yeah.
I totally agree with you. I mean, even Ukraine might have been different had we had a stronger union.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Even Turkey, maybe even Turkey, because Turkey wouldn't need to juggle Russia and the United States.
And it's so far off policymakers' minds. It's really frustrating. I don't know how it is in Italy. I always thought that the Italians are more able to think about European integration because they're more frustrated with their national situation, and everybody else is still more sort of living under the illusion that they have a national option, particularly in Germany. So among my Italian friends, this thesis of mine is much more palpable than among German friends. But maybe Corona is helpful in that respect also, that people realize that the nation state is basically quite it doesn't help with that sort of problem.
It's defunct, but even for privacy.
It's defunct. Yeah.
Even for privacy, even for everything, actually. Well, maybe not everything, but just think of how strong Google is.
Yeah.
How can
I agree?
I totally agree.
I agree. So, guys, there's a lot of stuff ahead of us. Interesting times, and it's really nice and good to know that there are groups like this and thinking.
Maybe next time we'll try to, when you publish your next book, we could do it on Zoom so that we have more interactivity.
Whatever you wish. Yeah, I was really glad that you approached me. I very much appreciated this opportunity to talk, and you know how to find me. Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oops. Yeah? Sorry. You were saying something. I interrupted you.
Okay. I will now take care of my little daughter.
All right. Hello.
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 Hello. Cheers. Bye-bye.